How's it going, everybody? It's Dylan again, and I'm back with another episode of Real Talk. And I am going back to my series of A Moment in Time to bring you a few more articles and discuss some things. So, to get it started, my first article is by Charlotte McDonald Gibson on the topic of world, and it is entitled, "Is NATO Trump's Next Target?" The preferred term for the 29 countries of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is not members or signatories but allies. Yet as a July 11th through 12th NATO summit approaches, 28 of those nations' leaders would be forgiven for questioning whether that word still applies to the leader of the 29th. In the space of 2 weeks in June, U.S. President Donald Trump baited the EU and Canada into a trade war, argued that Russian President Vladimir Putin, still under EU and U.S. sanctions for the annexation of Crimea, should be invited back into the G7, and branded Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as dishonest and weak. He then met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, calling him a very talented leader. More recently, National Secretary Advisor John Bolton was dispatched to Moscow to meet the Russian president ahead of a Trump-Putin summit in mid-July. That could strengthen bilateral ties between the U.S. and Russia and make allies even more anxious. The friends and allies of the United States were left wondering who is the leader of the democratic world. Anders Fogh Rasmussen, the previous Secretary General of NATO, tells Time. Many in Brussels are now concerned that NATO, the alliance that has preserved global stability since 1949, might be the next foundation block to go as the president tries to uproot the old world order. It would be no less than a disaster, says Rasmussen, not only for the Western democratic world, but for the democratic world globally. Yeah, I mean, look, man, Donald Trump is just tearing everything apart. Just complete fucking chaos. And I've said it before, I think he's going to be starting the next world war and the next, American Civil War, and I mean, I don't know. I hope that all of this outlandish shit that he says and does ends up spurring, a revolution. We need a revolution in this country, people. We need to come together as one, and we need to start, we need to make some changes. We need to bring, America back to its fundamentals, where we started, and the basic ideals of what this country was founded on. Which, I mean, I understand is hard to distinguish considering the fact we come over here, we basically steal land from, indigenous people that lived here already, and we still oppress them and prosecute them and all sorts of stuff as it is today, pollute their lands and various things and whatever. But look, man, we just need to come together as a people for a common goal, and that's the greater good, man. That's the greater good. If everybody works for the big picture, right, everybody's going to benefit inherently. That's how it works. It's not like, it's completely opposite to this whole trickle-down theory, that was put into place however long ago, and so on and so forth. You can't concentrate power and wealth into the hands of a few people and then think, everybody's going to benefit. I would like to say that if I had all the power and wealth in the world, yes, I would personally make sure that everybody has education and health care, good food, that we are doing things to make sure that, climate change is being reduced and reversed. We'd be planting trees, we'd be, building up the world again, the natural world. We would do a lot to change the way our medical field is run and designed, instead of just trying to, treat disease, but actually prevent and, cure shit. There's a lot of things that I would do, but at the end of the day, even if I did have all that power, I would still hold, advisors and people close to me that I would talk to regularly for opinions, points of views, and other perspectives. And then furthermore, if I was to govern a large, group of people like that, I would make sure that I got, input from all of those people. I would have, representatives from every demographic, and I would make sure that I get the opinions and the wants and desires of everybody. And then, like I said, I would have my council, my group of people, my advisors that, I would take the input from, everybody, from polls and blah, 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 whatever, reaching out to people through, phone calls and emails and letters and whatever it is, just find out what the people want, how they feel, and so on and so forth. And then with my advisors, we would devise what is going to be the most effective and most efficient plan to ensure that everybody benefits and is happy. Right? So, our entire system needs to change. Our entire political system is corrupt, fucked, and, not going to work anymore. It needs... The one thing is he probably is going to destroy our entire political system. It's very likely that could happen. It's super dangerous and it's super, volatile, but it could actually prove to be beneficial in the long run if, we can actually learn some stuff from it. And if at the back end of it, good-hearted, true, morally and ethically fundamental people, can hopefully, take that next seat of power and start directing us in the right path. NATO has long played a key role in Trump's narrative that the U.S. foots the bill for the rest of the world at the expense of its own citizens. He once again lambasted NATO allies' contributions during a speech on June 25th in South Carolina by falsely claiming that the U.S. was responsible for 90% of spending. Oh, what a shock. Donald Trump's lying about something. In fact, the U.S. provides 22% of the NATO alliance's common funding. 68% disparity. Whatever. That's not a big deal. Which covers NATO's running costs, the military budget, and some capabilities like aerial surveillance. Under pressure from Washington and reacting to Russian aggression, NATO members agreed in 2014 to each increase defense spending to 2% of GDP by 2024. So far, only 8 NATO countries have met that target, Rasmussen says. While many Europeans agree with Trump's general point about defense spending, his approach is exasperating allies. One day after the G7 summit, Trump launched a Twitter tirade aimed at Europe, lamenting that the U.S. spends money protecting many of these same countries that rip us off on trade, and warning that change is coming. European leaders are now punching back at the U.S. French President Emmanuel Macron said, "We don't mind being G6 if needs be," while the EU retaliated on June 22nd with its own tariffs on U.S. goods. The initial idea of playing nice with Donald Trump has been demonstrably proven to yield no benefits, says Anthony Gardner, who served as the U.S. ambassador to the EU from 2014 to 2017. But there is far more at stake when it comes to NATO. Since Putin annexed Crimea in 2014, nations along NATO's eastern flank have been increasingly concerned by Russian aggression and still see the U.S. as the most important backer of their security. Without the United States, European security would be in great danger, says Latvian Foreign Minister Edgars Rinkevics. We can't simply build something that would exclude the United States. Look at the resources. Look at capabilities. Indeed, the Pentagon's European Deterrence Initiative will spend nearly $4.8 billion this fiscal year and plans on $6.5 billion in 2019. The American people remain committed to this alliance, said Air Force Major Cheryl Klinkle, a Pentagon spokeswoman. But tensions between the U.S. and Germany may come to the fore, since Berlin spends comparatively less on defense than other major powers. With that in mind, German defense officials traveled to Washington ahead of the summit to try to sell a plan to increase defense spending to 1.5% by 2025, though it would fall short of the 2% target. After the meeting, Defense Secretary James Mattis said Germany was on the right track. Rasmussen urges NATO members to keep discussions about defense spending behind closed doors, cautioning that a public disagreement might raise doubt over the U.S.'s commitment to Article 5, the clause that says all NATO members will respond if one is threatened. Putin might take it as a signal that when push comes to shove, the U.S. will not be ready to really defend its allies. He says, it sends a very dangerous signal to autocrats. At last year's summit, Trump caused a stir by refusing to explicitly affirm his commitment to Article 5 in a speech at a memorial to the attacks of September 11, 2001, when the U.S. became the first member to invoke the clause. He corrected that a few weeks later, reportedly on the advice of his national security team. Rasmussen hopes that this time Trump will also listen to figures like Mattis, who has served as a NATO commander. In February, the retired general told reporters, "NATO remains our #1 alliance." Bro, this shit is shaky as fuck. It's getting crazy. It's getting worse. And again, man, Donald Trump is going to cause significant conflict both in this country and abroad in the very near future. Things are going to come to a head and shit is going to get nuts. People, we need to come to fucking together. We need to come together on this shit. Alright, moving on. My next article is by Tessa Berenson. And the article reads, "What's hidden inside the Supreme Court's ruling on the travel ban?" For President Trump, the Supreme Court's ruling on his travel ban could be summed up in a word. Wow, he tweeted. In one of its final decisions of the term, the Supreme Court on June 26 rejected a challenge to Trump's September 2017 order banning entry to the U.S. for citizens of some Muslim-majority nations, a big win for the administration on a policy that has been mired in the courts for months. But Trump's simple exclamation belies the complex divisions and revelations within the decision. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the majority that the government showed sufficient national security justification for the order and that the demographics of the countries it affected weren't proof of religious hostility. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, joined by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, disagreed. In a stinging dissent, she accused conservative justices of ignoring the facts of how the order has been advertised. The other two liberal justices joined in a different dissent. This wasn't the court's only hot-button issue case this term. It also said that California couldn't force crisis pregnancy centers to advertise state abortion services, held that law enforcement needs a warrant to pull cellular site records, ruled narrowly in favor of a baker who refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, which is fucking terrible, and sided with Republicans in 2 gerrymandering cases. But the travel ban was always going to be the most political, and justices on both sides of the ideological spectrum took pains to separate themselves from what is now considered one of the court's most shameful decisions. The court officially overturned 1944's Korematsu v. United States, which infamously upheld the constitutionality of an internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and which has been the subject of comparisons to current immigration policies by the administration's opponents. That's because it is very, very similar. It was a disgraceful thing. I mean, think about it, people. Literally, we condemn Hitler for the things that he did, right? Which one of the primary things he did was imprison people in internment camps. Now, granted, he did things a lot worse than we had done, but we go and we attack somebody, right, for the things that they do. We condemn them for that. So on and so forth. We go to war over it, and then we do the same fucking shit. Like, okay, hypocrisy much? For SCOTUS watchers, of all the opinions issued by the court on this case, the one to pay attention to was Justice Anthony Kennedy's concurrence. Siding with the majority, he also urged officials to remember the importance of religious tolerance with the poeticism that some attributed to a man who might not have many opinions left to write. Sure enough, the next day, Kennedy, at 81, announced his retirement. An anxious world must know that our government remains committed always to the liberties the Constitution seeks to preserve and protect, he wrote, as if seeking an epitaph for his career on the bench, so that freedom extends outward and lasts. That would be nice. I would hope so. We can all hope. But good luck, especially since he's, coming off the bench and Trump's gonna probably fucking put some jackass motherfucker that's just gonna make the rest of the shit, that much worse. But damn it, change is coming, and I have optimism, people. Things are coming together in a weird, fucked up, twisted kind of way, but I have extreme optimism that it's all going to work out how it needs to. Everything that needs to happen for things to change positively and for us to finally turn things around and get going in the right direction are going to happen. Yeah. I don't believe in God, so I don't mean it like that, but I am a spiritual person, and I think that, everything obviously does happen for a reason. Even if it's from a simple perspective of, you make choices and you reap the results of your choices, right? So things happen for reasons, and I think that the right things, there are pockets of good in the world. There are the right people out there. Hopefully, I like to include myself, but hopefully there are more than I believe there are, and hopefully more people start, opening their eyes, awakening to these things, and jump to the right side, and we can come together as a people, as not just Americans, but people in general. Break down these barriers. Stop fearing the differences and embrace them, and realize that is where a lot of our potential lies, man, and we can do great things. We just need to come together. Alright, moving on. The next article I have is by Molly Ball on the on the topic of Washington Memo, entitled "The Inscrutable Melania Trump is Redefining America's Weirdest Job." Excuse me. It was all Melania's idea, the statement rebuking her husband's immigration policy, the hastily arranged trip to the southern border, even the jacket. Oh God, the jacket. From the beginning of her husband's term, First Lady Melania Trump has been mysterious, private to the point of secretive, seldom seen and even less often heard. As outrage over the administration's policy of separating children from their parents peaked, the First Lady, herself an immigrant who came to America seeking a better life, took it upon herself to speak up. But the message was so inscrutable that the mystery only deepened. On Father's Day, the First Lady released an unprecedented statement, not so subtly taking issue with her policy with the policy. Without consulting her husband, she planned a June 21st trip to an unaccompanied children's center in McAllen, Texas, according to her office. Whatever message was intended, it was overtaken by the words on the back of the green jacket she wore as she boarded the plane. I really don't care. Do you? I hate this bitch. I hate her husband, and I want to slap the shit out of both of them. They're both ignorant, selfish, fucked up piece of shit people. And just because she, said some shit that she doesn't like it shouldn't be this way, blah, 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 doesn't really mean anything. Doesn't really mean she's a good person. You can't call upon it, being a good person when it's convenient, right? Integrity, people, what integrity is doing the right thing all the time. Whether, people are watching you or, whether they're not. Whether, it's all about personal accountability. Making sure that you hold yourself accountable at all times to make the right decisions, to do what is right, to do what is just, to do what is fair, to do what is equal. Right? And you're not a good person if you do some things, good things when it's convenient for you. That doesn't make you a good person, right? To be a good person, you have to do things right all the time. Now, that's not to say you can't make mistakes, you can't fuck up. Sure, you can, right? It's part of learning and growing. But you actively and consciously try and make the best choices at all times. You use logic and reason to, determine those choices, right? Right and wrong. You use pros and cons. You use those things to determine those choices, and you make the best ones you possibly can every day, and always strive to be better than you were the previous day. That's what it means to be a good person. To have integrity, to have character, right? Strong character, fundamental morals and ethics. Every First Lady bears the burden of having one of the world's weirdest jobs. It comes with no salary or fixed portfolio, but plenty of star power, expectations, and scrutiny. Most of the office's recent occupants have combined spouse-supporting symbolism with a set of pet policies. Melania Trump, by contrast, has offered only the merest glimpses of her life and the vaguest semblance of a platform, which is why the jacket became a fresh token for speculation on the meaning of Melania. As with other women who put up with problematic men, from Hillary Clinton to Harvey Weinstein's assistants, we can't decide whether she's victim or accomplice. Absolutely accomplice. And her silence only deepens the mystery. The enigma begins with the Trumps' unusual relationship. The president's third wife, 23 years his junior, cried on election night, according to Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury. She didn't move to Washington for nearly 6 months after the inauguration so that their only child, 12-year-old Barron, could finish the school year in New York City. She and her husband sleep in separate rooms, according to the New York Times. Barron now attends a private school in the D.C. suburbs. Melania's parents, Slovenian citizens who are legal permanent residents of the U.S., are rumored to reside in the area. In early May, 16 months after her husband took office, Melania unveiled her official program, a three-pronged mission to encourage healthy living, fight opioid abuse, and counter cyberbullying. Which is great, but then other shit she does completely contradicts that, and that's why I say you can't fucking, you can't be a good person when it's convenient. You gotta be a good person all the time. Doing bad things occasionally can make you a bad person. If you consciously if you consciously make the decision to do those things and, do them despite the fact that you know that you're hurting other people. But doing things occasionally that are good doesn't make you a bad person. If you live the majority of your life and you do bad shit, you're a bad person. It doesn't matter, if sparingly you bring out a little bit of good. Then, on May 15th, the White House announced that Melania was at a Washington area hospital for a procedure to treat a benign kidney condition. The procedure, a surgical treatment known as embolization, is a minor one, but she didn't resurface until 24 days later. Her husband tweeted a combative explanation for her post-surgery absence that amplified the rumors. During her recovery from surgery, they reported everything from near death to facelift to left the White House and me for New York or Virginia to abuse. He wrote, "All fake, she is doing really well." Other public comments only deepen the mystery. On June 7th, Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, said the First Lady believed her husband's denial that he had trysted with the porn star Stormy Daniels in 2016. First of all, he's a fucking misogynist pig that openly admits to grabbing women by their pussies because he can. Why would you be surprised that he had a tryst with a fucking porn star? Secondly, of course this shit is all just a fucking mystery. None of these fucking people like to be honest or truthful or transparent, right? Most people in general just don't like that. I get a lot of shit from people because I'm just a blatantly honest fucking person. Sorry, but I think that the world needs a lot more truth and honesty. Fuck feelings. Feelings are great and they have a place in the world, but when you allow your emotions to overrule you, to take control and allow things like logic and reason to be cast aside because of emotion, there's a problem there. And that's why humanity is as volatile and problematic as it is, and why people have a difficult time with communication and relationships. Come on, people. You need to be able to fucking control it. You don't have to get rid of it. We don't need to be without emotion. Emotion is great. Emotion, brings about laughter and happiness and joy, love, right? It's important to have it, but it's also very important to channel it and use it properly. Said the First Lady spokeswoman, Stephanie Grisham, "I don't believe Ms. Trump has ever discussed her thoughts on anything with Mr. Giuliani." At the border shelter in McAllen, Melania asked children a series of factual questions. Where are you from and how old are you? She didn't hug them or ask about their feelings. Then she got back on the plane where the cable news firestorm over the $39 jacket had already erupted. When she got off, she was wearing the jacket again. Yeah, look, dude, our president and this bitch and a lot of these motherfuckers that run the fucking government and these corporations and blah, 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 dude, these motherfuckers are heartless bastards. America, how can you fucking celebrate this country when we do the shit that we do? It's outrageous, outlandish, disgusting, abhorrent. We should be ashamed of the shit that we allow happen, that we allow the people who represent us to do. When she got off, she was wearing the jacket again. Worn by a civilian on the street, it would be a tart declaration of aloof detachment, a little bitchy, a little confrontational. But in the context of the trip, it was sharply at odds with her mission. The First Lady and her staff declined to offer an explanation. "It's a jacket. There was no hidden message," Grisham said. It's not hidden because it's fucking blatant and obvious that she doesn't give a shit. Even though she's taking this trip and she said she cares, but she doesn't really give a shit, which is evidenced by the jacket and her fucking, indifferent approach to how she, went and talked to these children. It's fucking Jesus Christ. The president then undermined that statement, of course he did, with a tweet claiming the jacket was a message to the fake news media. Donald Trump's Secret Service name is Mogul. Melania is his muse. As a model and celebrity wife, she's surely accustomed to being looked at. That's actually interesting. Isn't that supposed to be a secret thing? Their Secret Service names? That's interesting. Anyway, women, especially beautiful ones, have long understood that there's nothing so tantalizing as something you can't understand. Now Melania's actions raise the most tantalizing question of all. If she really doesn't care, what might she do next? People. This shit is out of fucking control, man. Out of control. Alright. I have one more article for this episode, and it is by Massimo Calabresi, and it's entitled, or it's on the topic of Supreme Court, entitled "It's Trump's Court. The unpredictable Anthony Kennedy's retirement presages a more conservative era on the Supreme Court." For years, some of the most consequential discussions in America were held around a small round table in front of a window with a view across First Street to the Capitol building. It was there, in the pin-drop silence of his Supreme Court chambers, that Justice Anthony Kennedy convened his clerks each year to assign and analyze, the cases that would come before America's highest court in the coming months. It was also where Kennedy would greet guests for private conversation. Courtly to the point of caricature, he would have his staff lay out white linen napkins in a cut crystal milk jug, then serve tea. He would also salt his legal analysis with Shakespearean allusions, fresh in his mind from after-dinner reading at home with Mary, his wife of 55 years. Alternately, self-effacing and grandiloquent, he talked about the books he was reading and what worried him about the law, the country, and the world. And what it was there at the table, in the early morning after beating the Washington traffic into the Capitol, that Kennedy often wrestled with the thorniest issues America faced. Should abortion be legal and easily accessible? Yes and yes. How could affirmative action be deployed to right the historic wrong of racism without becoming racist itself? Dude, we need to get over civil rights, man. We shouldn't be at this point we shouldn't still be debating these things at this point in human history. We're all humans, point blank, period, bottom line. We're all part of nature. We all live off the planet that sustains us. That's it. Should gay people have the same rights as straight people? Yes, because they're fucking people. Gay people, straight people. Common word there, people. We're all people. People, come on. If the image of quiet, contemplative debate seems anachronistic in these vituperative times, the contrast is even more poignant after the justice's latest decision. They put a lot of hard-to-pronounce words in here. On June 27th, Kennedy announced that he would step down from the court, taking with him the unique moderating role he has played in America for 3 decades. The last swing voter on the court, he sought, often to the frustration of everyone around him, to find compromise between competing ideals and, at times, ideologies. What remained of that world is about to come crashing down. Some 30 minutes after the 81-year-old justice met with President Trump in person at the White House, his resignation became news, and preparations for battle broke out across Washington. Leonard Leo, Trump's top outside advisor on judicial nominations, told Time that the president could announce a nominee in the next 2 to 3 weeks. The timing would put Trump on track to potentially seat his second justice by October 1st. The start of the next high court term, and well before midterm elections, could alter the Republican majority in the Senate. I think that as long as the president sticks to the model that worked last time, which is to appoint someone like Neil Gorsuch, Leo says that is the best recipe for ensuring some level of bipartisan support. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who orchestrated the GOP blockade of President Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland to the court on the grounds that a new justice should not be confirmed in election year, said he had no such reservations this time. As word of Kennedy's resignation broke, McConnell convened a group of senior Republicans in his office to walk them through his plans to confirm Trump's nominee this fall. "We will vote to confirm Justice Kennedy's successor this fall," McConnell said. Immediately following Kennedy's decision, which had been rumored for months, conservative groups sprang into action. Americans for Prosperity, backed by billionaire brothers Charles and David Koch, turned the keys on a seven-figure grassroots campaign to build support for Trump's nominee. The political machine is ready to run ads, knock on doors, and make phone calls to pressure senators. The effort also aims to energize conservatives who might otherwise have sat out this November's elections but now see a solid conservative majority on the nation's highest court as more than a theoretical prospect. "We knew this day was coming. We have plans on the shelf," says a GOP official. "We are Republicans. This has been our dream for years." For many Democrats, it was a moment to mount the barricades. In an election season when women are dominating Democratic primaries, the selection of a justice who might vote to overturn Roe v. Wade would put massive pressure on even traditionalist senators to filibuster. Whether it's a women's issues or discrimination against religion or the LGBT community, all those are at risk, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland told Time. The tactics that the Senate Majority Leader used denied the Supreme Court its proper membership. The partisan agonists are not wrong about the significance of the moment. Over the years, Kennedy had been a critical vote on everything from gay rights to free speech and even the 2000 presidential election. His replacement with a reliable conservative could shift the country's top court to the right, which would be fucking disastrous, likely making abortion less available, affirmative action programs more limited, and executive power more expansive. This will be, predicts Nan Iran, head of the liberal judicial group Alliance for Justice, the most significant fight over a Supreme Court nomination in decades. So real quick, here's a few of Kennedy's key decisions. This dude's confusing. I know he's trying to make everybody happy and be bipartisan and open-minded, which is spectacular and fantastic. You have to be. But he kind of goes back and forth, man. And he okay, here it is. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, 1992. In one of the many abortion cases Kennedy would hear, he sided with the court's progressive wing and voted to uphold Roe v. Wade. He continued to support the precedent through his tenure. Great. Fantastic. Amazing ruling. Citizens United versus FEC, 2010. Kennedy wrote the majority opinion holding that corporations have the right to free speech. The decision opened the way for massive campaign spending in recent elections. Terrible decision. Companies are not human beings. They should not have free speech. That's absolutely ridiculous. Obergefell versus Hodges, 2015. Kennedy wrote the landmark decision legalizing same-sex marriage across the country, the capstone of his long history of expanding gay rights from the bench. Phenomenal. Great decision. Fisher versus University of Texas, 2016. Kennedy walked a fine line on affirmative action, opposing quotas by saying race could be considered as one of many factors. In 2016, he wrote the decision upholding UT's policy that considered race in admissions. That's retarded. That's a terrible decision. Race, gender, sexual preference, any of that shit should not be a deciding factor or even a factor, period, for admissions to college or for jobs. Jesus. First and foremost, everybody should have full and open opportunities, free opportunities for all education. And for jobs, it's just whoever's the most fucking qualified, man. Jesus. Kennedy's willingness to cross party lines was never as great as some like to believe. He was, after all, a true Republican in the mold of Ronald Reagan, who appointed him. But the moderation that gave heart to liberals has roots in Kennedy's upbringing in the cozy neighborhood of Lamb Park in Sacramento, a picture-perfect family enclave in mid-century California. Kennedy's father, known as Bud, was a successful lawyer and lobbyist, and he and his wife, Sis, regularly hosted the Capitol's civil servants and politicians on their back patio, with its citrus trees and small lawn. The bookish young Kennedy looked up to these charismatic figures, and a happy childhood with friends in the neighborhood offers a particular lens on his jurisprudence. His father's work, which he eventually took over after graduating from Stanford and then Harvard Law School, was very much embedded in the freewheeling influence peddling of the California legislature. Some have seen in Kennedy's resolute opposition to constraints on campaign finance spending, including his opinion in the Citizens United case, an echo of his own work from that time. There were other influences too. Kennedy was set on his path to the court by an unlikely figure. Gordon Shaber was an influential lawyer in Sacramento and got to know Kennedy through his work. He later recruited Kennedy to teach constitutional law at the night school he was transforming into a respected institution. It was from there that Kennedy found occasional work advising on tax law and other matters for Governor Reagan. After Kennedy became a pivotal vote on gay rights on the court, it emerged that Shaber had lived the difficult life of a closeted gay man. Kennedy later spoke on Shaber's bravery with admiration at his funeral. When two of Reagan's more ideological nominations to the Supreme Court went down in 1987, Reagan tapped Kennedy, whom he had suggested that President Ford appoint to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals 12 years earlier. Colleagues soon found Kennedy to be an old combination of bombast and self-effacement. He famously infuriated Antonin Scalia with his high-minded writing. Kennedy, in one famous decision, spoke of the mystery of human life, only to see it become a joke in Scalia's dissent. But few ever doubted that Kennedy wrestled honestly with the issues at hand. There were very few easy cases for Justice Kennedy, says Michael Dorff, a former Kennedy clerk who is now a law professor at Cornell. That's not just because he was sort of in the middle ideologically, but because he wanted to approach each case with an open mind, which is super important, and I believe that the next motherfucker that goes in probably won't be doing that. They'll have a very specific agenda, and they'll want to follow that explicitly, no matter who fucking is hurt by it. His departure sets up a difficult decision for Democrats. The party's liberal base is eager for a confrontation over any Trump nominee, but the moderate voters the party needs to win in November may prefer compromise. The backlash could be fierce, top Democrats warn. On the other hand, anything that suggests Roe is on the table sends suburban women running from the Republican Party, says one Democratic strategist. Trump may make a play for the base, and that is only upside for us. Trump assured the public on June 27th that his nominee would come from the same list of 25 judges that he started writing during his campaign, an unusual gambit that allies credit for helping to coax skittish conservatives into backing him. Two of those judges, Thomas Hardiman and Raymond Kethledge, were finalists for the nomination that went to Gorsuch and are likely to be considered again. Brett Kavanaugh, a judge on the D.C. Circuit and a prep school classmate of Gorsuch's, is another possibility. Whoever emerges will join a court that hasn't been immune from the country's increasing polarization, where once the clerks of justices socialized in recent years, they've clashed. Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Scalia used to go to the opera together. Now the only time some justices see each other is at their weekly conference or on the dais in the ornate hearing room. If Kennedy returns to Lamb Park, he will find the world there has changed too, but at least one lingering demon may have been exorcised. Not all of Kennedy's childhood memories are positive. One involves a young Japanese-American playmate who owned a samurai doll that was kept in a glass case. Kennedy thought it was a funny toy you couldn't play with, but one day a knock on his family's door revealed his friend, weeping with the doll in his hands. He handed it to Kennedy before running away. Kennedy later learned the boy had been sent to an internment camp for Japanese Americans, a national disgrace that was later codified into law by the court's Korematsu decision. Kennedy's coda may end up being the correction of Korematsu. The day before he announced his retirement, the court issued a deeply divided ruling on Trump's ban on migrants from largely Muslim nations, but it united on one issue of moral conviction. In his majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts said Korematsu was gravely wrong the day it was decided, has been overruled in the court of history, and, to be clear, has no place in law under the Constitution. Justice Sotomayor, in an otherwise blistering dissent, called the court's unanimous rejection of Korematsu a formal repudiation of shameful precedent that is laudable and long overdue. Behind the high principle in those words, and more importantly, in the court's unanimous voice, it was hard not to see one last effort by Kennedy to unite the country. Alright, real quick, here's the short list for Trump's nomination. Trump has promised to fill Kennedy's seat with a judge from a list he has already publicly released. Here's a look at some of the top contenders. Amy Coney Barrett, Indiana, U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. Before she was confirmed to the 7th Circuit in October, Barrett weathered tough questions from Senate Democrats over whether her Catholic faith would influence her decisions on the bench. Thomas Hardiman, Pennsylvania, U.S. Court of Appeals for the 3rd Circuit. The first person in his family to go to college, Hardiman was the runner-up to Neil Gorsuch for Justice Scalia's seat. Brett Kavanaugh, Maryland, U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. Like Gorsuch, Kavanaugh was once a law clerk for Kennedy. He was a significant addition to Trump's list last fall. Amul Thapar, Kentucky, U.S. Court of Appeals for the 6th Circuit. Thapar is a home state favorite of Senate Majority Leader McConnell's, and he was interviewed by Trump last year. Oi, good Lord, good Lord. Alright, people, well, that's going to do it for this episode. A lot going on. There was a lot to talk about. I'll have some more videos for you soon from this edition. Some more things to talk about, so I will get back to that and get back to you soon. In the meantime, if you like this video, please subscribe, hit the like button, share, comment. Let's start a discussion, and let's come together and start figuring out some solutions. But anyway, that's going to be it for now, so I will see you guys soon.